Welcome to another episode of Pistons of Fury. In this episode, I'm going to show you how to install an intercooler in your 1960s Mopar muscle car. So here we are, back in the garage, and this project has taken a turn into the land of complexity. So out here on the floor next to me, I have laid out all the different components that have to fit behind the grille in my Dodge Coronet. The grille, you can kind of see here, this is half of it. I really like this. It pops really nicely with the car and the paint scheme and everything else. So I want to keep it. We're going to keep it stainless steel, not painting it, not masking it or blacking it out or anything. So this is half of it, and here on the floor I have a brand new radiator, a slimline fan, radiator shroud, AC condenser because I need AC, giant intercooler 3 inches thick, and two of these guys which are multi-purpose coolers. In this case I'm going to be using them for a transmission cooler and another one identical to this for an oil cooler. So the challenge that I have is that obviously none of this stuff came factory. Well, actually the radiator and the condenser would have come factory, so that's kind of, there's room in there for that stuff. But this other stuff, specifically the giant intercooler and being able to route the piping, is going to be kind of a challenge. So we're moving from the hot side of the project over to the cold side. There's still work to be done on the hot side, mainly the wastegate and the downpipe, but that's pretty easy. I kind of know where that's going to go. And more importantly, that's not going to interfere with any of the cold side piping, so I can just go ahead and leave that for a little later in the project. But the core issue right now is that this grille is held on, or it's basically held in place by a series of panels that go behind it and that also have to do with the hood latch. So there's a whole system there that needs to be re-architected from the ground up because, to my knowledge, nobody's done something like this before. So that's the challenge. First thing is just going to be reassembling some of the old rusty parts, mainly the pieces that hold on the grille to the car, and then we'll start fitting things and see what we need to do and where we need to start cutting things. Not super rare parts, they're easy to get, but yeah, we're going to be cutting some things. Alright, so this is clearly the worst place to be working in the garage because it's actually raining here this weekend, so I can't open this door. And this car, being 18 feet long, barely fits in my garage, so I'm wedged in here. But I wanted to point out a couple things. So I have the top cross member put on. I have the grille mounted to that. And what we have here is we've got this triangle thing, and so this basically would mount to a vertical brace that holds together this whole assembly and also provides some structural support for my for the bracket here and the hinge assembly, not the hinge assembly, but the bracket assembly that holds the hood in catch and release system. I'm going to be using a different aftermarket piece for that, so I don't need to retain all of that, but I likely will have to chop this off because the intercooler has to kind of fit up under here. So the other obstacle that I have is the piece that I cut to make putting the engine in easy and things like that, which is this guy right here. So this would basically fit in like that in a typical stock setup. This would just get welded back in and you wouldn't be able to see it. But the problem is that the radiator is going to have to occupy some of this space in here. So I'll either have to modify this, cut it, or just make a new one once I get the radiator put in. So I guess the next thing I'm going to do is probably mock up the radiator and the intercooler and see where we are when I do that. Okay, new day, same problem / project. So what I did yesterday is just some initial placement, playing around with different configurations for this radiator. So what I have now is there's basically a little ridge down here, which you can kind of see. So this is the setup, or possibility A, of the radiator resting inside the engine compartment. So what that means is I have all this room up here to fit the intercooler behind this grill. So I'm not sure if this is the winning setup. I'm also unsure about this radiator in general. Now I already bought it, so I'm incentivized to use it. However, I do have the radiator that I was using for the mock-up, which is the Crown Victoria. It's like a full 26-inch core, 31 inches wide, which I know is a pretty common radiator setup these days. So the other option I had is using something that's thinner like that actually fits in the engine compartment, and then coming in here and cutting this. I guess that's a change I could make after the fact. Shouldn't be too impactful on things. So the question I'm just wrestling with is, because the issue is I have this gap here, and I can leave that as a gap, I can figure out something else to do with it, but really that's just that space that could be occupying, or could be occupied by more radiator, which in this case, since we've got a turbo, we've got basically what are almost full-length headers. Even with ceramic coating, there's probably going to be a lot of heat in this engine bay. So just kind of thinking about it. I want to keep my options open, but the way I have this set up is actually pretty good. So I clear my suspension piece down here, even with some rubber padding for this radiator when I mount it. This will basically come, this is the coolant flow, so this has to come back around here and wrap into the top. So we're looking at like a 90, 90, 90 and straight. So 3 90-degree turns, that's pretty straightforward. And what that will do is it will have the intake for the turbo basically come out here, come straight across, basically level with this alternator, and then kind of do a downward swooping thing into my airbox, which I will talk about at a later time. And then the final piece obviously is the cold air pipe. So coming from the intercooler, we're going to come under this fender, pop out through here somewhere, come up and over closer in front of the alternator, and then do like a 90-degree action into the intake. So this kind of limits the room. I'm going to play around with a different setup, and then I will come back and check in with you guys. Okay, so here is option B. So as you can see, I have my strap out of the way. I basically have, this is where I chopped off my upper radiator support, and it's kind of sitting tucked right into and almost flush with, I don't know what you would call this, radiator support structure in the front of the car. So the good news is I gained some clearance on the bottom because I'm actually sitting up above this bottom ridge. I'm actually sitting on what would be the lower radiator support. I don't know the names of all these things, but they're in my manual over there. And yeah, it gives me a lot more clearance with my fan with respect to the exhaust pipe, which was a little bit concerning me with the other setup. And then finally I get some clearance here for my cap. Now the downside is that I can't just weld back in my upper radiator support. I'll actually have to create a new one, and then the other issue is that this cap is right here, so I will have to, I think I'm going to be running a surge tank anyway, an overflow tank, not just an overflow, but an actual surge tank, so I will have a higher point than this at some point in the cooling system, so I'm not super concerned about being able to get to that cap. So the downside to this is that I have very limited room with respect to what I can fit behind the grill here. So, well, you can't really see it through the grill, but if you look down here, you know, I can grab a tape measure, but it's going to be super close. Basically, the intercooler is going to be sitting right up against, basically right up against the grill and the radiator, and I definitely have to modify this right here. So, decisions. I actually have been watching and rewatching the Skid Factory build, where they basically kept the stock grill on their Galaxy when they did the turbo 1UZ engine in that, and there's basically how they like to do it is they use the intercooler as part of the structure. So this is still a little, it's very flexible. You can't attach a hood to that by itself, but if you sandwich an intercooler in there and you have some solid mounting plates, then it becomes an actual structure again. So that's going to be my plan too. I'm going to have to re-engineer some of that and see how that works. And then the other obstacle that I have is that I have to fit those coolers in here somewhere, so we'll have to figure out a place for those. So lots of stuff to fit, tiny spot, but I think this is going to be the winning setup in terms of where this radiator gets placed. So yeah, got to figure out what to do next now. Okay, so update on where we are. As you can kind of see through here, I've got the intercooler crammed up into the grill. There's going to be some minor trimming on the back of the grill just to make sure that that's going to be okay. Also wedged the condenser down in there, so that's going to have to get mounted. Somehow all this stuff is going to have to get mounted so that it doesn't rub against each other and it doesn't squeak or make noise or rub through aluminum, or all of that combined, actually. So that's going to be the fun challenge, but I think this is the basic setup. So in here we've got the intercooler, we've got the condenser wedged behind it for the AC. I will have some connections coming out over here. Probably have a AC dryer right in here. I'll have to find someplace else for the horns, because that's where the horns went. And that should be okay, because then I can route my AC lines down here along the frame, keep them out of the way of the exhaust and everything else. So that's cool. Now the issue that I'm going to have is that if you look under here, my intercooler piping outputs from the intercooler line up almost exactly with these big brackets that hold the bumper in place. So I need to reinstall those and see what my interference is going to be like to see if I need to bring this intercooler up in the grill. And I actually can do that. I've got a good, you can kind of see there, that's the top of the intercooler, kind of right there. So I've got a good, 4 inches or so that I can come up to avoid those, but I need to put those in so I know where my interference is and know how I'm going to route the piping before I start doing anything permanent with this thing. So I'm going to reinstall those and we'll see where we get from there. Okay, so as I suspected, these guys, well, in true genius fashion, I have my jack actually in the way of putting that thing back on, so I need to move those jacks, or jack stands, and probably just move them back on the frame so I can reorient this. So have both of the bumper brackets in place. The good news is those holes that hold them in, or that I use to attach them, are slotted, so I do have a little bit of adjustability there. So that's good news, so that I can move the bumper in and out. Bad news is I think if you move it out too much, it looks kind of awkward. So I've got plenty of clearance with respect to where the intercooler is now, but the problem is that the bracket is right in the way. So options at that point are dealing with cutting holes in bumper brackets, which is probably not a really good idea, or moving the intercooler up. So now that I've got those in place, they are sitting about, maybe, I'm going to say like an inch higher than they should be. So I'll have to lift the intercooler up and see what I can do to get it to clear, to see how much room I have. So yeah, we're going to check that out and see what we can use to position it a little bit better. Okay, so I've been doing a bunch of measuring, and I think I've got a good placement for the intercooler, and that's going to dictate the placement of the radiator and the rest of the coolers up front. So what I did was the B-body Mopars come with this nice, it's called an air dam in the factory manual, and mine was actually just mounted about 2 inches higher than it needed to be. So I had removed it. I was going to do some custom bracketry, but I found that if I just lower it a little bit, which I have held on here with some vice grips now, it's actually the perfect height and the perfect placement for this intercooler. So this episode, as it continues, is going to be mounting this stuff, getting it kind of mocked up in position, and making sure that I've got room for everything that I need to be in here. Do they arrive home?
Yeah,
How far is time from? Yeah. Yeah, so that's not fairly far at all.
It's not far. You don't have to go on the highway. Yeah, 15, 20. Quick update, and see where we are here. So you just saw me creating this little crossbar out of some square stock, so that fits on the top of the intercooler. Angled the edges so I can kind of recess the hardware, and actually just ran out to Ace and picked up some stainless because of the clearance in there. I needed to go kind of cap head screw. I forget what that's called. Anyway, it uses an Allen key. I've got bits that'll fit in there, so that should be fine. Also, the piece that I cut off of right here, I think it was in the last episode, turns out I'm going to have to weld that back on because I'm going to be able to, because of the intercooler placement, I'm actually going to be able to use my, my stock hood latch assembly. So, probably going to see me tacking that back on and also modifying this piece. This was the original piece that went all the way down. I'm probably going to chop it off here and mount it to the bar that I just made. So that'll be kind of the next piece of this adventure. so update to what I think is going to be all the progress that I make in this episode. So basically where we're at is I was able to reuse these pieces of the old front bracket. I don't even know what this assembly is called. Front hinge grill assembly. Anyway, came in here, tacked that back into place. So this is original. I'll finish welding that up and clean it and paint it, grind it all off. It'll look fine. What that does is it basically comes down through here. I cut that other piece, bolt into place like OEM, comes down. The only thing that's different is it doesn't go all the way down to the bottom of the cowl. But in place of that, we now have a shiny new intercooler. It basically comes down, mounts to my crossbar right in here. It's just tack welded for now until I'm positive 100% that this is what I'm going with. But yeah, actually looks pretty good. Stainless hardware inside there. But yeah, mounted on the bottom, now on the top, it's super sturdy. So pretty psyched with how that came out. Next up is the radiator. I've got a plan for that. It's going to involve some angle iron, making some custom brackets, and I'm basically just going to sandwich it in there with some isolating mounts, and I think I'll be good. So the only other variable from that, which I'll have to build some brackets off of that, will be my AC condenser, so I'll do that at the same time. But I've got a plan for that. That's going to be part 2 of the cooler situation. But yeah, that'll be in the next episode. But yeah, for now, intercooler mounted, no interference, clears everything, stock grill, awesome.